Did you know that there are some underrated 80s R&B bands you forgot existed? From the Whispers, who recorded the hit Seems Like I Got to Do Wrong, to the Mary Jane Girls, who had some big R&B hits like Candyman, Boys, and the smooth, sultry All Night Long. Here are the underrated 80s R&B bands you forgot existed. The Whispers. The Whispers are an American R&B vocal group that started all the way back in 1963 in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. The group was made up of twin brothers Wallace and Walter Scott, along with Gordy Harmon, Marcus Hudson, and Nicholas Caldwell. In 1966, they were invited by Sly Stone to perform in the San Francisco Bay Area, and from there, they began making a name for themselves as one of the best live acts around. During this time, Walter Scott left the group for 18 months to serve in the Vietnam War, but rejoined after his service ended in 1969. A few years later, in 1973, Gordy Harmon got into a car accident that damaged his voice, and he was replaced by Leah Vale Degree, who had been in another popular group called Friends of Distinction. In their early days, the Whispers released singles on Door Records in Los Angeles, but their first big break came when they signed with a smaller label called Soul Clock. It was there they recorded their first hit, Seems Like I Got to Do Wrong, in 1970. Later, they moved to Janus Records, where they did a lot of recording in Philadelphia. In 1978, the Whispers joined Solar Records, one of the most exciting R&B labels of the time. That move gave them even more success. In 1979 and 1980, they topped the U.S. dance charts with And the Beat Goes On, and in the U.K., the song reached number 2. In 1981, their single It's a Love Thing also became a top 10 U.K. hit. Then in 1987, they scored one of their biggest hits ever with Rock Steady, which climbed to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. Not only did they perform music, but in 1989, they even sang the national anthem at Game 2 of the World Series. Through the years, the group stayed strong, even as members started to leave or sadly passed away. Marcus Hudson left in 1992 after being diagnosed with prostate cancer and passed away in 2000. The group made a promise never to replace him, and they continued as a four-man group. Nicholas Caldwell died in 2016, and Gordy Harmon passed away in 2023. In June 2025, Walter Scott also died, leaving Wallace Scott as the last surviving original member. The Whispers were later honored for their long legacy and contribution to R&B music when they were inducted into the National Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame in 2014. Even after decades in the industry, their smooth harmonies, timeless songs, and classy performances have left a mark on R&B history that can't be forgotten. Atlantic Starr. Atlantic Starr is an American R&B group that started out in White Plains, New York. The group was originally made up of several talented musicians, including three brothers, David, Wayne, and Jonathan Lewis, along with Porter Carroll Jr. on drums, Clifford Archer on bass, Joseph Phillips on percussion and flute, and a few others who left before the group made their first official recordings. In 1977, they moved to California and started performing under the name New Band. But when they got signed by the record label A&M Records, legendary music executive Herb Alpert asked them to change their name, and that's when they became Atlantic Starr. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, Atlantic Starr built a steady following with several R&B hits. But it wasn't until the mid-1980s that they really crossed over into pop music. Their album As the Band Turns and the hit song Secret Lovers helped bring them into the mainstream. Around that time, the band had shrunk to 5 members, mostly made up of the Lewis brothers, Phillips, and lead singer Barbara Weathers. Their biggest moment was in 1987 when the group released Always, a romantic ballad that hit number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts. It became a wedding favorite and helped make Atlantic Starr a household name. But after this success, Barbara Weathers left the group to start a solo career. She was replaced by Portia Martin, and in 1989, the group released a new album called We're Moving Up, which included another #1 R&B song, My First Love. Even though they never reached the same level of pop success again, Atlantic Starr still made hits into the early 1990s. In 1991, they introduced a new female lead singer, Rachel Oliver, who had once won the Miss Black America pageant. With her on vocals, they released Masterpiece, which became their biggest hit of the 90s, reaching #3 on both the pop and R&B charts in 1992. However, things started to slow down after that. Their partnership with Warner Brothers ended, and they signed with Arista to release an album called Time in 1994. Unfortunately, it didn't do very well, and the single I'll Remember You barely made it onto the charts. Even so, Atlantic Starr didn't give up. Over the years, the group kept performing and continued to evolve. In 2017, they released their 13th studio album called Metamorphosis, with new members Eljon Epps and Melissa Pierce joining the lineup. Midnight Star. Midnight Star is an American R&B and funk group that became famous in the 1980s for their fun, danceable music. The group started back in 1976 at Kentucky State University, where a bunch of students who loved music came together to form a band. The founding members included Reggie Calloway, who played the trumpet and also led the group, singer Belinda Lipscomb, Melvin Gentry, Kenneth Gant, Bill Simmons, Bo Watson, and Jeff Cooper. Later on, Reggie's younger brother, Vincent Calloway, joined as the trombone player. At first, they performed in college and around their local area. But things changed in 1978 when they played at a showcase in New York City. That performance caught the attention of Dick Griffey, who ran Solar Records. He liked what he saw and signed the group. Midnight Star released their first album, The Beginning, in 1980, but it didn't get much attention. Their next two albums, Standing Together and Victory, did a little better, and songs like Hotspot and I've Been Watching You started to get noticed on the R&B charts. In 1983, they released No Parking on the Dance Floor, which turned them into stars. The album had a perfect mix of funk, R&B, and electronic sounds, with robotic-sounding vocals that fans loved. The single Freakazoid became a massive hit, reaching #2 on the U.S. R&B chart. Other songs like Wet My Whistle, Electricity, and the title track No Parking on the Dance Floor also got a lot of airplay. One song on the album, Slow Jam, was even co-written by a young Kenneth Babyface Edmonds. The album went double platinum and made Midnight Star a household name. They followed up with more success. In 1986, they released the album Headlines, which also sold well and had hits like Midas Touch and the title track Headlines. Those songs were especially popular in the UK, with Midas Touch reaching the top 10. But around that time, problems started within the group. Reggie Calloway, the leader, had disagreements with the others and left the band. His brother Vincent soon followed. The two of them later formed their own group called Calloway, and in 1990 they had a big hit with I Wanna Be Rich. Meanwhile, Midnight Star continued without the Calloway brothers. They released two more albums, Midnight Star and Work It Out, in the early 90s. These albums didn't do as well as their earlier ones, but songs like Don't Rock the Boat and Snake in the Grass still made it onto the R&B charts. After that, the group slowed down and took a long break, though they never officially broke up. In 2000, Midnight Star reunited with many of the original members and released a new album called 15th Avenue in 2002. These days, the group still performs from time to time. The lineup usually includes Belinda Lipscomb, Kenneth Gant, Melvin Gentry, Bo Watson, and Bobby Lovelace. Sometimes Bill Simmons joins them too. Club Nouveau. Club Nouveau is an American R&B group that started in 1986, right after the popular group Timex Social Club broke up. The group was formed by music producer and performer Jay King in Sacramento, California. He pulled together a new lineup that included Valerie Watson, Samuel Prater, Denzel Foster, and Thomas McElroy. Their first album, Life, Love and Pain, came out the same year the group was formed, and it made a big splash. 4 songs from that album became hits: Jealousy, Situation 9, Lean on Me, and Why You Treat Me So Bad. Jealousy was actually made as a response to Timex Social Club's gossip-filled hit, Rumors, but it was their version of Lean on Me, a modern twist on the Bill Withers classic that really took off. It became a huge hit on the Billboard Hot 100 and even won them a Grammy Award for Best R&B Song in 1987. That same year, it was also nominated for Song of the Year and earned the group several other awards and nominations, including 2 American Music Award nods. Why You Treat Me So Bad became another major moment for Club Nouveau. Even though the song didn't top the pop charts, it had a long life in hip-hop. It was sampled by the rap duo Luniz for their hit I Got 5 on It, and later by Puff Daddy for Satisfy You. Not long after their early success, members Denzel Foster and Thomas McElroy left the group to start their own production careers. Samuel Prater, who sang lead vocals on Lean on Me, also went solo but came back to the group in 2009. As Club Nouveau moved into the 90s, their music started to include more socially conscious messages. They explored deeper themes in songs like You Ain't No Friend of Mine, and released albums such as Listen to the Message, Under a Nouveau Groove, and A New Beginning. They also recorded a dancehall-inspired version of the gospel song Oh Happy Day, and contributed the track Step by Step to the Who's That Girl movie soundtrack. While they didn't keep up the same level of chart-topping fame, Club Nouveau stayed active and creative, shifting their focus to meaningful lyrics and soulful production. Thanks to the success of Lean on Me and their other early hits, they carved out a lasting name for themselves in R&B history. The SOS Band. The SOS Band is an R&B and electro-funk group that made a big name for itself in the 1980s. The band started back in 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia. The original members were a mix of talented musicians: Jason Bryant on keyboards and vocals, Billy Ellis and Sonny Killebrew on saxophone, Bruno Spieth on guitar, John Simpson on bass, James Earl Jones III on drums, and Mary Davis as the lead singer. At first, they were called Sounds of Santa Monica because of a fun concert they once played in California. Their manager believed in them and sent a demo to Clarence Avant, the head of Taboo Records. He signed the band but didn't like their name. When he asked why an Atlanta group was named after a city in California, Jason Bryant explained it was a tribute to a show they did there. So producer Sigidi Abdullah gave them a new name, the SOS Band. Their first big hit came in 1980 with Take Your Time, Do It Right, which shot up the charts and sold over 1 million copies. Their first album, simply called SOS, also did well and went gold. As the group gained popularity, they added more members, including trumpet player Abdul Rauf. They followed up with a few more albums and started working with well-known producers like Leon Silvers III and the famous duo Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Together, they created some of the band's biggest hits, like Just Be Good to Me and Tell Me If You Still Care. These songs helped define the sound of R&B in the 1980s and even popularized the now famous TR-808 drum machine. Their later albums, like Just the Way You Like It and Sands of Time, kept the hits coming. Songs like The Finest and Just the Way You Like It made sure the SOS Band stayed in the spotlight. But by the late 1980s, things started to change. Lead singer Mary Davis left to go solo in 1986. The band kept going with new vocalists like Chandra Corelli and Freddie Grace, and released more music, including the 1989 album Diamonds in the Raw. Sadly, founding member Billy Ellis passed away during the making of that album. They kept making music into the 90s, but their newer albums didn't do as well in the charts. Eventually, Mary Davis came back to perform with the band on tour, giving fans a chance to hear the original voice behind many of their classics. In 2021, Mary Davis took a break after suffering a stroke but she returned later that year for a special performance with original members of the band. If you are enjoying this video, appreciate it by giving it a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Tease was an R&B band from Los Angeles that started back in 1979. But their story actually began a couple of years earlier, in 1977, when they performed under the name Seventh Heaven. Not long after, they changed their name to Tease and started working toward their big break. The group included lead singer Kipper Jones, guitarist Joseph Parson, lead guitarist Thomas Organ, drummer Derek Organ, who is Thomas's brother, keyboardist Rex Salas, and bassist Cornelius Mims. They played around California for a few years before getting noticed by a famous session drummer named Ollie E. Brown. He believed in their talent and helped them land a deal with RCA Records. In 1983, Tease released their first album. It had songs like Flash and What Should I Do? But sadly, neither song became a hit. By 1986, a few members had left: Parson, Mims, and eventually Salas. New members came in, like Jay Shanklin on bass, and Chucky Booker, who first joined as a keyboard player and later took over full-time when Salas stepped away. Salas did return briefly for their 1987 tour, but the group had already started to change. That same year, they signed with a new label, Epic Records, and dropped their second album. This time, they had a hit with the track Firestarter, which reached number 11 on the R&B charts and stayed there for 11 weeks. Things were finally looking up. In 1988, Tease released their third album, Remember. It included a cover of the song I Can't Stand the Rain, which got a little attention, but it wasn't enough to keep the group going. Later that year, Tease broke up. Even though the group didn't last, the members didn't stop making music. Kipper Jones and Rex Salas helped write and produce Vanessa Williams' debut album, The Right Stuff, which included the hit title track. Other bandmates like Mims, Booker, and the Organ Brothers also worked on the project. After that, they all found their own paths. Cornelius Mims became a well-known session bassist, working with legends like Gladys Knight, Mary J. Blige, and LL Cool J. Rex Salas went on to play live with stars like TLC and Robert Palmer, and earned Grammy and Emmy nominations as a music director. Tommy Organ became a session guitarist, playing on big hits for Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, and TLC, often alongside his brother Derek. The Mary Jane Girls. The Mary Jane Girls were an all-female R&B group from the late 1970s and 1980s, created by music legend Rick James. The group started taking shape in 1979 when Rick James began working with singers like Joanne McDuffie and the Water Sisters, Maxine and Julia, in his studio recordings. For live shows, JoJo was joined by Cherry Wells, Candy Gant, and Kimberly Wooletich. At the time, they were simply part of Rick James's band, called the Stone City Band, but they soon became known among the crew as the Mary Jane Girls. They weren't just singing. They practiced dance routines and worked hard under vocal coaches. In 1983, Rick James told Motown Records he wanted JoJo to go solo. But somewhere in the mix, the label misunderstood and signed the whole group instead. So Rick just rolled with it and officially formed the Mary Jane Girls with JoJo, Cherry, Candy, and Maxie. Rick James did all the writing and producing. He said the idea for the group had actually come to him years earlier. He wanted a black girl group that could sing about real things: love, pain, money, and heartbreak, not just the sweet side of romance. Their image was bold and edgy, with each member playing a different character: a tough city girl, a model, a playful cheerleader, and a dominatrix. In 1983, they released their first album, Mary Jane Girls, and it had some big R&B hits like Candyman, Boys, and the smooth, sultry All Night Long. That last one even ended up in the video game Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, years later. Around this time, Cherry Wells left the group and was replaced by Yvette Corvette Marine, the daughter of singer Patty Brooks. The group's name, by the way, came from Rick James's love for marijuana. Mary Jane was a nickname for it, and he even had a song called Mary Jane. In 1985, they released their second album, Only For You. JoJo sang most of the vocals, and the Waters sisters were called in again to help on background vocals. The group's biggest hit came from this album, In My House, which hit number 3 on the R&B chart and climbed to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying in the top 40 for 12 weeks. Another hit, Wild and Crazy Love, also did well, but the third single, Break It Up, didn't gain much attention. They recorded a third album called Conversation, but it never got released at the time. Still, 2 singles were shared from that project, Walk Like a Man and Shadow Lover. The songs had some airplay, but by then, Rick James and Motown were having problems. Without label support, group members started finding other jobs. By 1987, the Mary Jane Girls quietly broke up, but they left their mark. In 2019, the group was honored and inducted into the Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame. The System. The System was a music duo from the 1980s known for mixing R&B, pop, and electronic sounds. The group was made up of David Frank, a talented keyboardist, and Mike Murphy, a smooth singer. The two met while working with a funk band called Clear. David played the keyboards, and Mick was the road manager. At first, David didn't even know Mike could sing. One day in New York, David was working on a track called It's Passion, which was originally supposed to feature a then unknown Madonna. But after a disagreement, Madonna left the project. That's when David remembered Mick Murphy and asked him to sing on it instead. Once they finished the song, they knew they had something special. The track quickly became a hit on New York radio and in clubs, and it helped them land a record deal. That's when they officially became The System. Their debut album, Sweat, came out in 1983 and included songs like Sweat, I Won't Let Go, and the hit You Are In My System, which reached number 10 on the R&B charts. The song was so good that rock singer Robert Palmer even made a cover of it that became a hit too. The System followed up with a second album in 1984 called Experiment. David used cutting-edge studio technology to create a fresh sound with heavy synths and electronic drums. Even though the music was futuristic, Mick's soulful voice kept it grounded in R&B. The album had songs like I Wanna Make You Feel Good and Promises Can Break. Around the same time, they performed in the breakdancing movie Beat Street, singing Baptize the Beat. In 1985, their third album, The Pleasure Seekers, came out, featuring songs like It Takes Two and Love Won't Wait for Lovin'. They also worked with jazz-funk artist Jeff Lorber on his album Step by Step. By this point, the System had become known for blending high-tech sounds with real emotional depth. But their biggest moment came in 1987 with the release of the song Don't Disturb This Groove. It was a smooth, catchy track that became a #1 R&B hit and reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was their most successful song ever and is still remembered today. The follow-up, Nighttime Lover, also did well, reaching number 3 on the R&B chart. After their final album, Rhythm and Romance in 1989, the duo went their separate ways. Mike Murphy released a solo album and had a minor hit in 1991. David Frank shifted behind the scenes and found success writing and producing hit songs for other artists, including Genie in a Bottle by Christina Aguilera and He Loves You Not by the girl group Dream. Even though they were only active for a short time, the System helped shape the sound of R&B and pop music in the 1980s. Loose Ends. Loose Ends was a British R&B group that was popular during the 1980s and early 1990s. The group started out in 1981 when they signed to Virgin Records under the name Loose End. Some of their early songs were written by Chris and Eddie Amu, members of another successful British soul group called The Real Thing. By 1983, the band officially changed its name to Loose Ends, with an S at the end, and they kept releasing music through Virgin in the UK and MCA Records in the US. The group was formed by Steve Nicol, who had just finished studying music and had even gone on tour with the rock band The Jam, playing trumpet, trombone, and keyboard. Alongside Carl McIntosh and Jane Eugene, Loose Ends started to make a name for themselves. Their breakthrough came in 1985 with the single Hangin' on a String, Contemplating. It became a big hit in the UK, reaching number 13 on the charts. But it did even better in the US, climbing to number 1 on the Billboard R&B chart, making Loose Ends the first Black British band to top that chart. That same year, they also released Magic Touch, which reached number 16 in the UK. Then came Slow Down in 1986, which later became the theme song for the Canadian show Soul in the City. While their fame was rising, Carl McIntosh also helped other artists. He played and arranged songs for the R&B group 5 Star, including their hit single Let Me Be the One, which made it to number 2 in the charts in 1986. Loose Ends would go on to release more songs, including the 1988 hit Watching You, Watching Me, which found some success on both sides of the Atlantic. By 1990, the group had changed. Steve Nicol and Jane Eugene left due to creative differences, and 2 new members, Linda Carriere and Sune Suleiman, joined Carl McIntosh. That same year, they released their final studio album as Loose Ends, called Look How Long. It included the song Don't Be a Fool, their last big hit. Carl McIntosh took on a bigger role behind the scenes, producing music for other artists like Karen Wheeler, Ruth Joy, and Kwesi. Even though the original trio went their separate ways, Carl McIntosh kept the group name alive. Today, he still performs and writes new songs as Loose Ends, along with Linda and Sune from the 1990 lineup. In 2021, the group signed a new deal with Digital Jukebox Records, a British hip-hop label, to release new singles and albums. Aura was an American soul group that became popular in the 1980s. The group was formed in 1979 as a spin-off from the funk band Slave. It all started when Steve Washington, one of Slave's members, came up with the idea for a new project. He brought in fellow former bandmates Kurt Jones, Starlina Young, and Thomas Lockett. Later on, they were joined by Charles Carter and Buddy Hankerson to complete the lineup. Aura first signed a deal with Dream Records, but they later moved to South Soul Records, where they found their biggest success. In the early 1980s, the group released a string of hits, including Are You Single?, Checking You Out, and their most popular song, Make Up Your Mind, which climbed all the way to number 6 on the R&B charts in the US. They continued releasing music through 1985 with an album called Like I Like It. That same year, it was released in the US under a different name, Bedtime Story. The album was re-released in Europe in 1986, this time with a new single added, You and Me Tonight. That song became a hit in the UK, reaching number 12 on the charts. But behind the scenes, not everything was smooth. Tensions began to grow between Steve Washington and other members of the group. Legal problems over the Aura name eventually caused Kurt Jones and Starlina Young to break off and start recording under a new name, Deja. In 1987, Deja released their first album, Serious, on Virgin Records. One of the main songs on that album was You and Me Tonight, which they had originally recorded as Aura. This time, it became a big hit in America too, reaching number 2 on the Billboard R&B chart and crossing over to the pop chart. It turned out to be the most successful single from any version of the group. Not long after, Starlina Young left to go solo, and Misty Day came in as her replacement. Deja released one more album in 1989 called Made to Be Together. The title track, produced by hitmaker Teddy Riley, became a small hit on the R&B charts. Even though Aura was no longer active, the story didn't end there. In 2013, a record label called Family Groove Records found the old recordings for a never-released 5th Aura album, Satisfaction, which had been made in 1984 but shelved. They finally released it in 2015, along with another project titled Body Rock. And in 2019, Deja's second album, Made to Be Together, which had been hard to find for years, was finally released on streaming platforms. Surface. Surface was an American R&B group that started in New Jersey in 1983. It began with three musicians, David Conley, David Townsend, and Everett Collins. At first, David Conley's girlfriend, Karen Copeland, was the lead singer. David Townsend came from a musical family. His father, Ed Townsend, was a well-known songwriter who co-wrote Marvin Gaye's classic Let's Get It On. David Conley had been the bassist for the funk group Mandrill, and Everett Collins had worked with the Isley Brothers and helped start another band called Sunrise. These three had crossed paths over the years, and by the early 1980s, they decided to come together and form Surface. Their first single, Falling in Love, came out in 1983. It didn't do much in the U.S., only reaching number 84 on the R&B chart, and made it to number 67 in the UK. A second song, When Your Ex Wants You Back, also had only modest success. Around this time, Karen Copeland and David Conley broke up, and Copeland left the group. Without a female singer, the group was struggling until they met Bernard Jackson in 1984. He had a strong voice and ended up becoming Surface's new lead singer. The group packed up and moved to Los Angeles to chase bigger dreams. They worked hard to record their first album, and eventually their song Let's Try Again caught the attention of Columbia Records, which signed them. In 1986, Surface released their self-titled debut album, and things started to change. Songs like Happy and Lately became hits, reaching number 2 and number 8 on the R&B chart. Their big breakthrough came in 1988 with their second album, Second Wave. This album produced a string of hits. Closer Than Friends became their first number 1 on the R&B chart. You Are My Everything, featuring singer Regina Belle, also hit number 1. Their biggest song, though, was Shower Me With Your Love, which became a huge hit in both the R&B and pop world, reaching number 1 on the R&B chart and number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. That song alone helped the album go platinum, selling over 1 million copies. In 1990, they released their third album, 3 Deep, and finally included The First Time as a single. It became their biggest hit ever, reaching number 1 on both the R&B and pop charts. Other songs like All I Want Is You, again featuring Regina Belle, also did well. They even recorded A World of Our Own for the movie Return to the Blue Lagoon. However, by 1994, things changed. Bernard Jackson and David Townsend left the group, and Surface broke up. In 1998, the group reunited and released a new album called Love Zone, and a few years later, they planned to start performing again. Sadly, in 2000, David Townsend passed away at age 50, just 2 years after his father died. His sudden death brought an end to Surface's comeback plans. Levert. Levert was an R&B group from Cleveland, Ohio, made up of 2 brothers, Gerald and Sean Levert, along with their friend Mark Gordon. The group started in 1983, and what made them stand out right away was their strong musical background. Gerald and Sean were the sons of Eddie Levert, the legendary lead singer of the O'Jays. Their very first single was I'm Still, released on a small label called Tempra. 2 years later, in 1985, they dropped their debut album, I Get Hot, and people quickly noticed how similar Gerald and Sean's voices were to their fathers. But it wasn't until 1986, with their second album, Bloodline, that they had their first big R&B hit, Pop, 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 Pop Goes My Mind. Things really took off in 1987 when they released The Big Throwdown. The album featured the song Casanova, which became their biggest hit. It not only hit number 1 on the R&B chart, but also broke into the pop charts at number 5 in the US and reached the top 10 in the UK. That album also gave fans more hits like My Forever Love and Sweet Sensation. They kept the momentum going in 1988 with their next album, Just Coolin'. It did so well that it got nominated for Best R&B Urban Contemporary Album at the 1989 Soul Train Music Awards, and like the album before it, it sold over 500,000 copies. In the 1990s, Gerald Levert started focusing more on his solo career, but the group didn't stop. They still released 3 more albums, and in 2001, Rhino Records dropped a greatest hits album to celebrate their work. Sadly, the group's story ended on a tragic note. In 2006, Gerald Levert passed away from a deadly mix of prescription and over-the-counter drugs. Just 2 years later, in 2008, Sean Levert also died, while in jail, from health complications tied to sarcoidosis and Xanax withdrawal. Which of these songs do you like today? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our next video for more content.